Hey everybody, Steve here, Local Level Podcast. I'm sitting here today with Phillip Rutherford Law P.C. He's a child and family law professional, and you can find out more about his practice at rutherfordlawpc.com. Phillip, it's a real pleasure to have you on. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Absolutely. And we were talking last week about a lot of different topics. This particular topic, dealing with DCFS and Child Protective Services and all those different types of things, family law, the family and child courts, it actually does hit kind of close to home for me in particular, because I actually have experience as a child navigating that. So it's one of those things where this is a really interesting conversation, because I never really got the perspective from, the adult perspective of dealing with it. And can you tell me a little bit about what you deal with on a daily basis in your profession? What does that look like?
So as you mentioned before, I am a child and family-focused attorney. Basically, I help families resolve issues like divorce, custody support, and visitation, and kind of all the other smatterings that come along with family law. So on a day-to-day basis, it really kind of depends on where I am in any case. I'm either talking to someone for the first time, helping them plan for a potential divorce filing, or I'm talking to someone who is in the middle of some type of issue, not sure if it's a legal issue or not, but just needs some kind of guidance and assistance. And a lot of what I do is really listen to people's stories and try to fit their life or their situation into a legal framework, right, and basically to put it into the words and the form and figure that the court will understand. So any given day, I'm in court. Although not recently with COVID shutdown, but I'm either in court on the phone or talking to any number of people that are involved in family law matter.
Yeah, and there's so many facets to the family law thing. I mean, you touched on just a few of them. I mean, divorce and child services and custody. So many sensitive topics. So many things that are very important to resolve quickly for the most part. Divorces can be very rough, but one of the big things is domestic abuse, domestic problems, and you do deal with that as well. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, domestic violence touches on a lot of facets of life, and you see it both in the context of intact relationships. So in marriage, for instance, but you also see it. The other type of work I do is called parentage, which is basically the rules that govern two people that are not married but share a child in common. So basically, right, those rules, as opposed to coming out of a divorce, for instance, with children. So domestic violence is on, touches all facets of those people's lives. It's a tough situation to deal with. Yeah.
Well, the reason I really bring that part up is because of the fact that our current situation with the lockdown and everything going on, the courts are not open for the most part. Maybe they're opening up now. How has that affected your cases and your caseload and the resolutions for your clients?
Yeah, so I think in March, so like March 16th was the last in-person court date that I actually attended.
Wow.
And that was right when we were hearing buzzings about, the court being shut down for an extended time. Mm-hmm. I think initial 30 or so days was more because of the confusion about what actually was going on and kind of the long-term effects. I think it was just a pause on whatever was active in the court. Basically said, hey, if you had a court date kind of stuck in this time period, we're just going to reschedule you to a time when the court, is opened up. Mm-hmm. And it didn't really matter what you were in the middle of, so to speak, that when you came back to court, it was kind of an update. Hey, judge, this is what's been going on. This is where we are. This is what we've been able to work out or not work out. And then from that point, setting the matter for, a hearing or a trial or something else.
Sure.
At that point. So I think the first 30 was kind of contacting the client saying, hey, something's going on. We're still here though, so pick up the phone if you have any questions. As it started to drag out a little bit, the court was actually, and I'm a domestic relations attorney, so I'm in the domestic relations division. I will say that they were a lot more, it feels that they were a lot more proactive and kind of thinking about what to do as the shutdown kind of dragged out. So they definitely put procedures in place for hearing matters, but really they were kind of initially concerned with emergency matters. So if it's an emergency, we've definitely got a way for you to file this. We'll review it and say whether or not we think this, like a Zoom conference would be fine, or if this requires you and your client and all these people to come in. So they put processes in place to do something like that. Another thing, as it relates to my division, is parents who were stuck in a temporary parenting plan. So maybe they're trying a new custody arrangement, and so dad was going to get more time during the summer or some other time. That basically the court said in advance, like, we realize that the duration of these schedules might not have been what you thought they were going to be, or that the depending on the actual custody arrangement, some are a lot more specific in what parents can and cannot do. Some are very general, that dad just has parenting time this time, this time, and this time.
Right.
And the court said in advance that, listen, we realize COVID is an inconvenience for people, but we're just going to say that whatever's in place now is going to go ahead and stay in place until regular court kind of resumes. With the caveat, though, that obviously if you're represented or not, but if you're represented, your attorney could always file a motion. And if it was an emergency, that they had already made kind of procedures for getting emergencies handled as well.
Yeah, I can see that there's a lot of potential emergencies. And, whenever you're in that type of situation where it's a custody battle, there's so many situations where there's arguments and, when you're on lockdown, what do? You can't go back and forth. You can't, hand off.
So here's the thing with the lockdown. It was already stated that the kind of transporting or exchange of the child was not a risky endeavor. Like, that was permitted. They already said in advance, whatever the schedule and arrangements for the transport back and forth, we're going to say that that's good. That's good. Presumptively good. If you have a problem with it, file a motion. At that point to get it addressed.
Have you seen a large amount of people filing those motions, like for safety concerns, for instance?
Not filing of the motions, but I've gotten quite a bit of calls from people who are in these situations with. Just yesterday, actually, a potential client of mine basically was visiting with a friend outside, and everyone had a mask on. They were standing outside. Dad got wind of it on Facebook and called mom, angry, saying, how dare you do that? My spouse is immunocompromised. And here you're putting me at risk. So I think there's a lot of those types of things happening. Like, I'm getting, I think, phone calls about people like just unsure, like, what is a safe level, I guess, of COVID exposure or something like that.
Yeah, and the unfortunate part is nobody really has the answers.
Exactly.
So it's a very tricky subject. I can imagine that there's plenty of people looking for advice on those topics, and for you got to be pretty busy. Right before we were talking, you said it's been a crazy week. So that's a good thing that things are getting back, rolling again, thankfully. But let me ask you a little bit, just to kind of give a little background on you, and how you got into things, how you grew up, and kind of the reason why you got into this type of law. Can you tell us a little bit about your backstory?
Yeah, so I am from a very large family. My family is actually from Jamaica, and I lived there for a few years when I was younger. And I think that experience, being from a large family, being an immigrant of sorts, being a person of color, taught me this kind of bigger sense of community in terms of being involved in certain circles. So I was raised to, love people, to do right by them, and to, try to make a difference in this world. And I guess I just took those lessons as I grew up and tried to apply them. So in high school, for instance, I worked at a after-school center with at-risk youth. It was a great experience. Met the community, got involved there. When I after I graduated college, I actually took a job. So I went to college at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor.
Okay.
And I took a job with the college after graduation, basically helping to increase access and enrollment of at-risk youth in any kind of post-high school education. And the experience there, while we were really there to kind of talk about barriers to education, what we really found out was that some of the barriers rather to education don't really have anything to do with education. These are family and home problems.
Right.
For instance, Johnny can't pass first period math. And it's not because he's dumb or he's lazy. It's because Johnny's taking his brother to school in the morning because his parent leaves for work really early. So I feel like I had a lot of these types of aha moments growing up, and just in thinking about how I could do something with those experiences and do a little bit more about the work that I was doing. Law school seemed like a good fit. Mm-hmm. Where I am now in terms of a business owner. So I've always wanted to own my own business. I didn't know what it was until I completed law school and said, this is something that I think I can do on my own.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's a big leap obviously going through law school itself is a big giant task. So congrats to you on that. But starting your own practice is another animal all in itself. How did that process go? How long did you work for other firms before you decided to jump ship and start your own?
So I graduated in 2013, took the bar in 2014, and started the firm in 2015.
Oh, wow.
All while I was employed with the law school doing non-legal work. And so I took the time so after I got licensed and officially started the firm, I started taking on pro bono guardianship work, adoption work, and some, they call it guardian ad litem, but it's basically a person that comes into a case to kind of fact find and assist the court a little bit. So I did that for a couple of years. There's a fantastic organization here called Chicago Volunteer Legal Services. Okay. And they practice in several different areas of law. And basically how they function is people call them, say, this is the type of issue I have. And then they'll do an intake and they'll field it out to their attorneys that are kind of in this practice area. But a majority of the attorneys that help Chicago Volunteer Legal Services are volunteer attorneys who are doing it for free. So I took on work through them. Part of the reason why is they have an awesome support system. If you ever need assistance with the case, they have people in office that are dedicated to that specific practice area. So you can really, ask them questions and they'll explain things to you in a very kind of not to make you feel dumb type of a way.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. So after a few years of doing that kind of work, I just decided to make a go at it. It started to interfere with my work schedule in that I'd have to take off like time from work, a day off to go to court. But really, if a client calls you in the middle of the day, like my job now is to answer or to be responsive. Right. Then I really couldn't because of, I'm working. I'm at another job.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what I find a lot of times is, you got to either be all in or all out,
Somebody, one of my teachers, a law school professor, told me that she had never heard of a part-time attorney ever.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I haven't either. Yeah. It's noble work though. I mean, dealing with at-risk youth and child services, it's like, it's what I find, and personal experience, those things affect you for the rest of your life. And when you don't have anybody to guide you through it, whether you're the parent or, the child, it's like, if those things don't get resolved the right way and it drags on and bitter relationships, mother and father type of things, it can scar a child for the rest of their life. So it's like, I can see why you obviously are passionate about that type of work after having the experience with it. Can you point to a time where you maybe doubted that this was something that you wanted to get into? Maybe was there something that was a little rough and you felt like maybe I shouldn't be doing that? Has that ever happened to you?
I think when I maybe first made a go at doing it full time on my own. And then, so before doing adoption work, which makes people happy, it's families, guardianship, same type of a thing. But when I really dove into family law and started really hearing about, I know that adults do things that are crazy, and whether or not they make sense is a whole nother thing. But when a problem involves a kid, it seems a little bit more serious to me. And I think that as people started to tell me, this is what's going on in my life, this is what's going on with my kids, and it's one thing you have the adults and their problems and kind of the tangential effects it has on their kids. But then you also have kids with serious mental health issues that are that are exhibiting all these really extreme behaviors that parents also have to deal with potentially a co-parent that either is not on board with what's going on or is blaming the other parent for exacerbating and making it worse. And then, or basically this issue with kids having to go back and forth. So I think that as I really started to dive in and hear about some of the stuff that was really happening, I guess I thought to myself, what is the value that I'm adding into this situation? Like, what can I really do here? And I think that what I realized is, something that you actually said just a little bit earlier, that not knowing the process, not knowing what's ahead, not knowing how to handle this, or, even if someone engages you in the court process, what to expect out of that, I think causes a lot more stress, adds a lot more stress to, anything parents are dealing with. So I think that I realized that my value is that I'm calm in really hectic situations, that I'm really good at explaining to people, here's where we're at, here's the steps we need to do to get this, here are the potential things we'll face. And I think that, my value is really, I don't want to say taking the emotion out of the situation, because I'm a very empathetic person. Like I feel for these people, really kind of like helping them to refocus and get a plan in place to reduce whatever stress I can out of that situation.
Well, it makes perfect sense. And and I've been talking to a lot of attorneys lately, sensitive things, lots of, not just paperwork, and the ability to connect and to actually feel that emotion and understand where the client is coming from. I think outside of just law, in anything really, if you're having a client relationship or any relationship, to be able to put yourself kind of in their shoes. Obviously, you don't have everybody's experience. Everybody has their own set of experiences that get them to the point where they are. But trying to put yourself in that position, getting yourself to kind of have that empathy is so important. But like you said, not taking that emotion out of it, understanding and then navigating through it is so important, because that's what you're there for. It's to make sense of it all, to be the calmer head, to kind of prevail, I guess, whatever the saying is, calmer heads prevail. That's really important. So how did you have to learn how to do that, or was that something that came natural to you? Because that's not an easy thing to do.
I think it's a combination of both. I am naturally that way. I would say I'm not an emotionally driven person. I'm a logical type of a person. But I think the experience of how to counsel someone through something like that came, I think, just from repeatedly doing it. So people come in, tell me shocking things, I absorb it, and then help to kind of process that. And it's just the more that I do it, I think the better I get at that portion of it. But I think that the not reacting from an emotional standpoint is me naturally.
Well, that's probably a good thing, because if you were an emotional basket case, it would be a nightmare for you, because there's probably plenty of crazy things to dwell on that walk through the door or call you on the phone. So, like you say, you come at it from a logical perspective and try to keep the emotion out of it. But do you have any examples where that got a little rough and you got a little maybe too close or too attached to a case?
There was, 2020 now? So last year, I think it was. Yeah, last year. There was a client of mine that when we started working together, I realized that this was an emotional person. This person cried during the consultation, which isn't uncommon, but almost immediately. So I kind of said, okay, something's going on here. And it was the more I started to work with them, the more I realized that the situation was not right for some reason. I don't know if he had some other bigger issue that I, as an attorney, am not equipped to deal with.
Right.
But that situation, no matter, the amount of counseling I did for him or tried to explain, here's where we're at, this is what we're doing, this is why this is important that this and this happened. He could not get out of his own way, to make that happen. So the relationship got bad in the sense that it became emotionally weighing on me, because I knew that no matter what I was telling him, what he was doing was something different, and that ultimately I was waiting for the other side to file a motion or something to come my way. So I was this feeling of apprehension, just kind of waiting for something. So, we ended up parting ways. This person has checked in with me a couple of times since.
Oh, wow.
Since we did, but yeah, I think that's the only real time that the relationship I just felt like I could not get through to this person in the right way, that our working relationship would not continue.
Yeah, it makes sense. I work with, I do marketing for a living, and, I deal with small business owners, and everybody kind of has their little quirks. Everybody's different, even when you're dealing with the same similar types of scenarios.
Yeah.
People are so different, and people can be strange. So it's sometimes it's just not a good fit, and there's nothing you can do to change it, whether it's a personality thing or whatever. You got to be able to call those things, because the worst thing that you can do is get yourself involved in something and you can't get out of it easily, So yeah, I guess that's a good thing. It's a learning lesson to start off your practice. Now, one other thing, is as we all know, our businesses have all been affected by this lockdown. How has your business been affected specifically through all of this shutdown?
So I think maybe because of the way that I started practicing, I was maybe set up to be a little bit more efficient of an office. So I run, although I like to print things, I run a paperless office a lot. I have technology that I use to deliver documents to clients, to e-sign and things like that. Mm-hmm. So I would say the real effect that the shutdown had on me was more or less not being able to use my office, my physical office space in the same way, not having people here presently. Mm-hmm. But to tell you the truth, I feel like my business was already set up to work from home, in a sense. So it was more or less just make sure my printer and my scanner and things were in a location I could use.
Yeah.
And then the other effect is that, with people's income being a little bit uncertain, I would do consults with people that were like, I love everything you're telling me, but I'm not sure if I'm going to have a job next month. So I'm hesitant to start. Also had effect where, some of my clients did lose their jobs. So, working with them around those issues as well. Yeah. But I felt like I did a pretty good job.
Well, that's good. Yeah. What I find when I've been speaking with people that are newer businesses, younger professional people that are used to dealing with meetings like this, teleconferencing and doing everything online, that's kind of our, that's our generation. That's how we grew up. A lot of older attorneys and older law offices, older offices in general that operate on that paper and the copy machine and all that stuff, the fax machine, those people are really in a bad spot. Now, one of the things that comes to mind with that, I don't necessarily think of the court system as the most technologically advanced and efficient organization, or institution. How has that changed through all this? The way that you conduct hearings and get things done when you can't do it in person?
Yeah, so the court is relying heavily on Zoom video conferences, that type of a thing. You could, prior to the COVID shutdown, request that you appear, telephonically or something. So that a remote appearance is not a new thing. With, I think, the success of Zoom meetings, with the necessity of Zoom or those types of things, and then with the success of it, I think the court is going to implement doing it a lot more. I think the issue, one of the bigger problems is a lot of people, especially in domestic relations, choose to go pro se, which basically means they go without an attorney.
Right.
And not having that, intimate knowledge about who the judge is, who the coordinators are, who you can email or contact with a problem, is already problematic when you have in-person court, because you're just kind of walking around the building looking for someone. Right. Now, when you don't have any access, you're really kind of stuck out there. And, if you're talking about someone that doesn't have access to email or technology, what are they to do?
I don't have an answer for that. Not much. That's this has been eye-opening for so many people, all different walks of life, all different industries. It's like, if you can't adapt to the changes, and you have to adapt so quickly. This happened overnight, basically. Then you're out of business. You're done, and it's like, that's so sad. But it's also a positive thing. For the ones that are like you, where you started this and you're in a good position, because you're able to, I would assume, I think when we talked about this before, you leverage the technology to really make your workflow more efficient, keep your overhead down, and that's going to be overall better for you. But using these technological things, doing these meetings, these consultations over Zoom and all that, I would assume that you do. That's going to make it so much easier. So, it's going to make it so much easier for you, but also for your clients. And I figure if the court system can, really, really hold on to this and keep this as a regular thing, and really, build on it. I think that the backlog on cases, having to wait for a hearing for next month and next month and forever, never getting anywhere with things, I think that can go away. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that the system is going to hold on to the remote meetings and all that stuff, or do you think they're going to go back to business as usual? What do you think?
I think it'll be a combination of both things. I think that the remote meetings, like you said, have provided a lot of efficiency. So, for instance, there are courthouses that I visit, that are in the suburbs or just kind of around that are not downtown. It will take me 40 minutes to drive there. Right. I might be sitting 30 to 40 minutes waiting for my case to be called, and I got to turn around and come back. And that is wasted time, or time I'm billing to a client that really isn't me doing anything per se, but it's kind of like you've got my attention and my focus. Having the Zoom meetings quick, like there's some waiting around in the waiting rooms for you to be like admitted to something. But I think it cuts a lot of cost and time out for both the attorney. So now I feel like I can do more, in those mornings, because now I'm at my desk. I can jump into a couple of these meetings. I can do things while I'm waiting, versus just kind of the normal procedure. I think an interesting, I guess this will be interesting to see how it plays out. But so with a lot of family law work, you will involve third parties, so people that will do evaluations of a family, of a child, of a living situation, things like that. And, how do you conduct a thorough investigation of someone's house when they're like walking you around on FaceTime or something like that? So I think there are other problems that the video will not solve. It will make it efficient to meet these people, but how do you really do, your job without meeting your client in that way?
Right. Yeah. There's just some things that you have to do in person. If you're going to do it right, at least, So that makes good sense. It's very interesting though, from the business perspective, especially where, and you brought it up, where you actually have access to courthouses that are not anywhere near us, Have you thought about expanding your area? Have you thought about is that possible? I don't really know the legality of that, but is there any like going into different counties and things like that? How does that work?
So I think it'll depend on with what's going on with COVID, I think it'll depend on what procedures, the counties or the states, and obviously I'd have to be licensed across state border for, what procedures they would do.
Right.
But one of the memos that I saw a few weeks ago that came out about the Zoom meetings. So the court actually, domestic relations, put out a separate order specifically addressing conduct during electronic meetings, who's supposed to be there, who's not, what you're supposed to wear, those types of things. And one of the memos that came out prior just talked about the fact that Zoom or these video meetings was working so well nationwide. So I think that in whatever capacity our court system, and sometimes in some things we're ahead, sometimes we're behind in certain things, but in whatever capacity, video meetings and things like that are integrated into our court system, I think those things will also exist kind of in the broader, in other states and other counties.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. That's got to be exciting for you. Just because, you started this practice fairly recently, so it's not like you have to change your ways for a lot at least.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a really big opportunity here to, number one, pass that savings where you don't have to bill those hours sitting in traffic onto the client. You can actually handle more cases faster, so you're not losing anything. You're helping people faster. More efficiency is always better for the most part. But yeah, that's an exciting thing. Where do you see the business going? What do you foresee? What are your plans for your business as far as expanding and growing and bringing on other attorneys or anything like that? What do you think?
Yeah, so in the process of hiring a law clerk right now, so that's kind of first expansion, and that is more a symptom of the core of what I do. I would say is motion practice, is filing things with the court, responding to documents that are filed. So bringing in someone to kind of help me, turn the paperwork a little bit, to enable me to take on more business in that capacity. I'm doing a lot of thinking about, the size, how big I want my business to grow. But I feel like a common complaint from people about their attorneys is that, at some point they become non-responsive to them, or, you're the name and face of this firm, and I called, and maybe I talked to you initially, but every follow-up issue I have, it's your associate or someone else I'm talking to. And I really think that, that is the thing I don't want to lose in my business, is the fact that my clients know me, feel like they have a relationship with me, and that I actually care about what's going on with them. So, I'd love to grow in whatever capacity enables me to keep that connection with my client. And, if maybe that means bringing on other like super empathetic superstars or whatever to continue on the feeling I'm trying to build at my firm, then, it is what it is. But yeah, I think my concern is just losing out on the relationship with the clients if I expand, too much.
Yeah. At some point, the reward of actually solving people's problems, it goes away. And it's like, I think that's why you got into this, right? What's the most rewarding thing about what you do? What do you get up for every day?
Tell you the truth, it's a thank you. It's a thank you. And it's like I've had people cry in court, hug me and cry, all kinds of things. And it's, a divorce case in particular that I had, I think my client was just so wrapped up in the details of what was going on that literally the day we finalized, got the stamp on the divorce judgment, this emotional release happened. And I feel like, when people come to me, like I said, they are not always in a good place. And if I'm able to, from, engagement to judgment, help them really do something in their lives, and, they're appreciative of that, that's really all I need. I guess I realize that my job is complicated. It's tough. It's emotionally draining sometimes. But so long as me and my clients have a good relationship, and they know that, even if it's tough love that I have to give them often, that I'm doing it from a place of love, of respect, of caring about what's going on with them.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's it. Yeah, that's a good answer. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. I mean, a thank you is really, really important sometimes. Just that, like, okay, well, it looks like what I did actually matters. I
Yeah.
mean, there's nothing worse than doing something and feeling like it's worthless, or you're not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
I've had jobs like that before in the past where, you're doing something and then the next week it starts and you got to do it all over again,
Right.
sales in particular. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, I love having these conversations with people, like yourself, to kind of get a little perspective about the other side of things. You never really get an opportunity to like look through somebody else's perspective. Everybody's kind of got their things going on in the background. But so let's see here. We covered your why. Why do you do it? We covered that. We covered kind of your background. We covered where you want to go for the most part. Now let's talk a little bit about the actual method of how you grow your business and like the marketing part of it. How do you get your clients? I mean, I know people call you, but what are the most effective things that you do? What are the type of clients that? Okay, here's one. So if your phone could ring all day long and it was one type of client, it was one type of case, what would that particular case be?
So I would say that I, like I said earlier, I deal with kind of two issues. One, marriage, things that come out of marriage, and then the parentage issue, which are non-married parents. So in the parentage context, what you're really focused on is the child. And maybe you're talking money, but you're talking child support money or contributions for college or daycare, extracurriculars, those types of things.
Okay.
And those seem a little bit more straightforward. I think people can kind of keep their head on a little bit when they're focused on that. In the divorce context, like there are kids, but there's also property. And although they are not related, people have a hard time separating them. Like if she isn't going to let me see the kids, then I'm not going to be amicable in what I would offer as a settlement or something like that. So it's a lot of times trying to wrap up like financial issues that really don't have anything to do with the custody, but like the parents kind of stick them together because they can't get out of their own way. So I would say from that perspective, the parentage stuff is easier because we're only focusing on the kids and that, not dividing property up. Okay. But I mean, I think it's just the more that I do it, and not to say that every child support case is the same, every custody case is the same, but like I just get a better sense more quickly what this person is involved in, what it is they're trying to do, and then whether or not it's something I can actually help with.
Yeah. Okay. Well, sure, and it makes sense. Now, on the other side of it. Have you had any? I mean, I kind of asked this already a little bit, but what are the toughest cases for you? What are the ones that kind of like when they come through, you're just like, oh, this is going to be a rough one. What do you think?
Cases that involve children, sexual abuse, mental health issues with kids.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times those types of things compound what's already going on. And it's now trying to figure out like the therapist and the parents having to jointly pick this person, argue about qualifications, all these types of things. So those cases, I guess I have to think about also what's the situation, but who are these people? Is this a parent that is going to be receptive to hearing what I have to tell them? Can they hear bad news?
Yeah.
Can they handle bad news? Or, is this parent, I'm not saying trumping up what is going on, but is this parent exaggerating?
Oh, right.
A lot of times, whoever I'm talking to, the person on the other side is always the worst, worst person that you've ever met in the world. And sometimes, I will say when I first started, and this is something law school does not teach you, is that your clients will lie to you. Like they
Yep.
will look you in the face and lie. And it's one of those things where like, I want to believe everything you're telling me. The things I'm writing down to file with the court are based on our dialogue. And
Yeah.
it a couple times early on getting burned where someone is like, that's not at all what happened. Or
Wow.
no, that, it didn't happen that way. Was some interesting lessons.
So have you ever had to like kind of like research or look into somebody's story? Do you ever have to do that, like, to check it out?
Yeah, a couple of times. So when I first started, I used to run some ads on Google. So I got, I'd get phone calls that way from, people on the internet.
Yeah.
People would tell me stories. I mean, this this story was so unbelievable that I had to research it because I was like, there's no way that this happened. And then, come to find out that this guy had done this type of a thing before, going to other attorneys with this story.
Oh, wow.
So much so that apparently an appellate court had written a decision, specifically naming this guy, saying, that his failure to understand like the legal process does not, a lawsuit maker or something basic like that. But, very sometimes people will call and tell me some extraordinary things. You won't believe that this judge did this thing and, or whatever. So I will look some people up. I try to take people as I find them.
Sure.
A little. And if they give me a reason to doubt, then I'll do a little bit deeper of a dive. But for the most part, I don't Google people unless they're telling me something extraordinary.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine. If you're gonna, it won't be the last. I'm sure there's gonna be many more crazy stories walking through the door. Now, another thing, I'm just curious. Have you ever had like a divorce or something where you're in the middle of it and they work it out and they don't need it anymore? Has that ever happened? No.
No.
Okay. Well, that's all right. Well, I guess when it gets to the lawyer, it's probably pretty done then, right?
I mean, not to say that it doesn't. I've been in situations where the other side doesn't want a divorce.
Oh yeah, that's probably
divorce, but I mean, they haven't. Not anyone that's gotten reconciled while I've been working with them.
Okay. All right. Well, cross your fingers. It's going to be. I mean, I'm sure the divorce rate, I think, is like through the roof now with everybody kind of stuck in the house together. Have you noticed that? How has that been kind of playing out?
Yeah, so I feel like I'm getting sometimes people will come to me and say, hey, I'm ready to get a divorce. I don't know what that means really, but let's file, let's do something, let's start moving this process. The other group of people that come to me are just people that are like, what are my options here for this situation? So I feel like I've gotten a lot of the what are my options here? And necessarily when you're talking about a divorce and you have two people that live together, you've got bills that to maintain your marital household. Mm-hmm. And if it's a situation where you feel like you and your spouse are not going to, like, once paperwork gets filed, people start suddenly not seeing eye to eye, necessarily now that person has to move out. And then here's a whole nother set of bills, utilities and things like that now have to pull from that same marital estate. So I think sometimes when money is at issue, when the people don't really have it, or one spouse controls it, I think you'll get that type of a thing where people are just uncertain about what can I do. I'm the lower earning spouse here. I'm the one who is experiencing domestic violence, or I'm the one who is taking care of the kids, all the time and making them go to school and those types of things.
Yeah. It's, people are so strange. Everybody's got a story, and it's got to be. I don't know if I could do what you do. I'll tell you. So, I'm glad there's somebody like you to be able to handle that stuff and make sense of it. So, I mean, we've pretty much we've done a whole hour already. Can you believe that? It goes by really fast all the time. But I mean, it's interesting. Like I said, there's so many different people out there. There's so many different struggles that don't stop just because we have the COVID. So I'm glad that things are getting back open. When do you see us kind of getting back to like, I don't know, some sort of normal? Like, are the courts starting to open now? Are things starting to open up?
So I would say open in the sense that they are open via video.
Yeah.
So like there are still ways to get things done that way. I think July 6th was the last date that I saw as far as opening some type of in-person services. But, for instance, the daily centers, 30 floors, small elevators. So how do you resume in person when you're still trying to work out social distancing?
Right.
What the court has done is they've started, at least in domestic relations, they are scheduling Zoom status dates like for the first part of the morning and trying to get people kind of like through as many of this, to address the backlog as they can. So I see that, things are moving, things are happening. I think the court will reopen in some capacity to in-person stuff. But I also think that people will think that the Zoom, Zoom's worked out so well that I think that maybe there'll be a push to use that, even more or in substitute to actually physically attending something.
Well, if anybody is in need, how can people get a hold of you? What would you recommend that they do?
Yeah, you can visit my website, rutherfordlawpc.com. There's a schedule a consultation button on the website, or you feel free to call 312-878-7867. We'll sit you down for a consultation, figure out what's going on, get a plan of action going, and get you moving.
Perfect. And you'll do it over Zoom as well, right? So awesome. Well, Philip, it's a real pleasure to have you on. I definitely enjoy the conversation. Thanks for taking the time, and we'll put the link in the description below here. So if anybody is in need of services, definitely check that link out. Give a call for a consultation, at least just for advice. I believe it doesn't cost anything just for advice, right?
Free.
Awesome. Well, you can't beat free, right? So Philip, thanks again. We'll be talking again soon.
Thanks for having me, Steve.